I'm issuing an executive order this date. Emergency mission, priority AA.
Just like that.
Just like that.
You know, you don't look like a nut.
Let's quit waltzing around.
The 1970s nearly changed science fiction television forever, because scattered across this single decade are some of the most ambitious, most visionary, and most criminally underappreciated sci-fi shows ever produced. Within that same decade, there are 15 shows that carried the whole sci-fi genre on their shoulders. But here's the thing. Every single one of them got canceled. These aren't nostalgia picks. These aren't guilty pleasures either. These are shows that, if they launched today with the right showrunner and the right platform, would absolutely dominate. So if you think the 1970s were nothing but cheap sets and rubber monsters, you are about to be proven spectacularly wrong. Number 15. Quark, 1977.
I want to send an emergency lasergram to the M82 sector.
Before Star Wars even existed, someone at NBC greenlit a show about a man who collects garbage in outer space. And the wildest part is that it was genuinely funny. Quark premiered its pilot on May 7, 1977, exactly 18 days before George Lucas changed cinema forever. It was created by Buck Henry. Henry brought that exact same razor-sharp satirical voice to a premise that sounded insane on paper. For the cast, Richard Benjamin starred as Adam Quark, commander of a United Galaxy Sanitation Patrol cruiser. His crew included a humanoid plant for a science officer, a pair of identical twins who constantly argued over which one was the clone, and a transmute named Gene/Gene, played by Tim Thomerson, who shifted between male and female characteristics at random. The whole thing was produced by David Gerber and Mace Neufeld through Columbia Pictures Television. It was absurd. It was brilliant. In fact, after the pilot pulled enough interest, NBC ordered 7 more episodes as a mid-season replacement in early 1978. Unfortunately, they buried the show on Friday nights at 8 p.m. during one of the worst ratings periods in the network's history. Number 14. Salvage One, 1979.
I've known it for years. It's a pretty special place.
What do you got, about 2 dozen kids?
Andy Griffith once turned down a television show because he thought it was Saturday morning television. The show was Salvage One. He eventually took the role, and it became one of the most quietly prophetic sci-fi series of the entire decade. The concept came from Mike Lloyd Ross, a former Navy engineer who brought the idea to executive producer Harve Bennett. Bennett had already built a reputation producing The $6 Million Man, The Bionic Woman, and The Invisible Man. But in 1979, he was putting his credibility behind a show about a junkyard owner who builds a rocket ship out of scrap parts to fly to the moon and salvage abandoned NASA equipment. On paper, it looked like something out of a cartoon. It was anything but. The series found a terrific tone between obvious comedy moments and genuine action-adventure drama. Although the actual science was questionable, it was dressed up in enough pseudo-realistic explanation that audiences could simply suspend disbelief and go along for the ride. Fortunately, when Salvage One pilot aired on ABC, it was a ratings hit. Seeing this, the network immediately ordered 12 episodes and fast-tracked the show as a mid-season replacement. To give the science at least a thin layer of credibility, the production brought in Isaac Asimov as a consultant. There were even plans to sell a model rocket replica of the Vulture as merchandise. Unfortunately, those plans were scrapped. The show was canceled due to pure scheduling brutality. Number 13. Search, 1972.
Granite Springs Water Project.
Can you keep them under surveillance at all times?
In 1972, Leslie Stevens and Robert Justman teamed up to create a pilot called Probe for NBC. It starred Hugh O'Brien as a high-tech private operative working for a mysterious corporation called World Securities. The concept was described at the time as science fiction in today's world, and it was not exaggerating. Behind the scenes, every agent, called a probe, was outfitted with a miniature video camera hidden in a ring or a tie clip, dental implants for two-way audio communication, and telemetry sensors that transmitted their vital signs in real time back to a command center called Probe Control. Sitting at the center of that room was Burgess Meredith, surrounded by banks of monitors, pulling up facial recognition data, voice print analysis, and live surveillance feeds from government databases. This was 1972. There was no internet, no smartphones, no CCTV networks. And yet this show was casually depicting a global surveillance apparatus that would not become reality for another 40 years. But here's the thing. Immediately NBC picked up the series, problems started. PBS already had a show called Probe, and they demanded the name be changed. So the series was rebranded as Search. Search limped through 23 episodes before NBC quietly canceled it. Number 12. The Invisible Man/Gemini Man, 1975 to 1976. The Invisible Man debuted in 1975 with a pedigree that should have made it bulletproof. It was created by Harve Bennett, who had already proven himself as a top-tier sci-fi producer. The pilot script was co-written by a young Stephen Bochco. The theme music was composed by Henry Mancini. The show was produced by Universal Television with Leslie Stevens, creator of The Outer Limits, serving as a producer. On paper, this was an all-star team. In reality, it was a total disappointment. Behind the scenes, the show's special effects were groundbreaking for television at the time. Due to tight filming schedules, many of the invisibility sequences were done live on set, with McCallum wearing a blue bodysuit against a blue screen in one corner of the studio, while simultaneously interacting with the other actors on the opposite set. It was technically demanding and extremely expensive. The pilot drew strong numbers, but the series that followed struggled. NBC wanted formulaic action-adventure stories. The creative team wanted something smarter and more morally complex. That tension strangled the show from the inside. After 13 episodes, The Invisible Man was canceled. But here's the thing. NBC seemed never to be done with the concept, so they immediately retooled the show into Gemini Man in 1976, this time starring Ben Murphy as Sam Casey. And here is where the money issue becomes the story. The entire reason Casey's invisibility was limited to just 15 minutes per episode was a cost-cutting measure. NBC canceled Gemini Man after airing only 5 of the 11 episodes that had been produced. Number 11. Future Cop, 1977. A full decade before RoboCop hit theaters and changed action cinema, Future Cop premiered as a pilot film, starring Ernest Borgnine as Officer Joe Cleaver, a grizzled LAPD veteran who is paired with a rookie partner named John Haven. But the twist here is that Haven is not human. He is an experimental android designed by a police lab and programmed to be the perfect officer. Borgnine's Cleaver knows the truth. However, his other partner, Officer Bill Bundy, does not. That tension between who knows and who does not formed the dramatic backbone of every episode. But here's the interesting part. The premise had already caused legal trouble before a single episode aired. Famed science fiction writer Harlan Ellison sued ABC over Future Cop, claiming the network ripped off the idea from a 1970 short story he had written about a robot policeman. Ellison was not wrong to be litigious. The show shared striking conceptual DNA with his pitch, and he won the lawsuit. The case was settled in 1980. Ellison and Bova were awarded $182,500 in compensatory damages and $154,500 in punitive damages, totaling $337,000. For a show that barely lasted 2 months on the air, that lawsuit probably cost the studio more than several episodes combined. Number 10. The Star Lost, 1973. In early 1973, 20th Century Fox television producer Robert Klein approached Harlan Ellison to develop an idea for a series. Ellison pitched a generation ship called the Earthship Ark. The plan was ambitious. Behind the scenes, Douglas Trumbull came on as executive producer and developed a proprietary technology called Magicam that would allow live actors to be projected into elaborate miniature environments. The budget was roughly $100,000 per episode. But here's the thing. On set, Magicam failed to work reliably. The studio switched from film to videotape. In fact, Canadian writers were brought in to rewrite Ellison's scripts, and Bova's scientific advice was routinely ignored. He later recalled in frustration that writers on the show used terms like space senility and solar star, without understanding that one was fictional and the other was a tautology. Ellison, watching his vision get gutted in real time, invoked a clause in his contract and had his name removed from the credits. The Star Lost ran for just 16 episodes and was canceled due to low ratings. Number 9. Genesis 2, 1973. After Star Trek was canceled in 1969, Gene Roddenberry spent years trying to get back on television. His first real attempt was Genesis 2, and it is the most important failed pilot of the entire 1970s. The pilot was written and produced by Roddenberry for Warner Brothers Television and directed by John Llewellyn Moxey. The cast was remarkable. Roddenberry deliberately stacked the production with people he trusted. Cinematographer Gerald Perry Finnerman, costume designer William Ware Tice, and actors Mariette Hartley and Ted Cassidy had all worked on Star Trek. Even his wife, Majel Barrett, appeared in the pilot as a member of the PAX Council. The premise was essentially Star Trek rebuilt on Earth. Each week, Hunt and the PAX team would travel via subshuttle to discover a new pocket of civilization, exactly the way the Enterprise visited a new planet every episode. When Genesis 2 aired on CBS in March 1973, it performed well in the ratings, and CBS gave Roddenberry the go-ahead to develop 20 scripts for a potential series. In fact, the man had a full season mapped out, ready to produce. Then CBS screened a repeat of the original Planet of the Apes film. It proved to be an even bigger ratings hit than Genesis 2. The network decided they wanted that instead and passed on Genesis 2 in favor of producing a live-action Planet of the Apes television series. Number 8. Project UFO, 1978. Project UFO was Jack Webb's last weekly series before his death in 1982. The project was so intense that Webb personally went through the declassified files of the United States Air Force's real Project Blue Book and pulled his episode ideas directly from those case files. To further anchor the show in authenticity, he brought on Colonel William T. Coleman, a former official spokesperson for the actual Project Blue Book, as a producer and technical advisor. The series starred William Jordan and Kasky Swaim as two Air Force investigators operating out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, tasked with running down UFO reports across the country. Swaim had virtually no prior acting experience, but was cast specifically because Webb wanted a Southern accent to contrast with Jordan's rigid military delivery. The tone mirrored Webb's signature style. There were no melodramatic alien encounters, no conspiracy theatrics. Most investigations ended with conventional explanations, weather balloons, aircraft reflections, natural phenomena, and those that did not were left deliberately unresolved. When the show debuted as a mid-season replacement in February 1978, it arrived at the peak of UFO fever in America. The numbers were solid, the formula was working, the audience was there. Then NBC moved it. For its second season, NBC moved Project UFO to Thursday nights, where it sank quickly, and the show was canceled. Number 7. Man from Atlantis, 1977. Patrick Duffy did not own a swimsuit when he auditioned for the role that would define his early career. According to production lore, he showed up to the audition in his only unripped pair of briefs. That kind of resourceful determination ended up defining his character too. Because Man from Atlantis was a show that somehow held itself together through charm alone, operating on a budget that could barely sustain its ambitions, and still managed to become more culturally significant than anyone at NBC ever intended. The show was created by Mayo Simon and Herbert F. Solow, and it began not as a series, but as 4 television movies. In fact, the 4th movie was one of the highest-rated programs of its broadcast week. Based on that performance, the network ordered a 13-episode weekly series. But translating those TV movies into a weekly show nearly broke the production. Behind the scenes, Duffy had to bulk up significantly for the role, wearing nothing but a tiny yellow swimsuit for most of his screen time. For the audition process, an artificial body was built for him before he spent months gaining weight and muscle. There were no computer-generated effects in 1977. Everything was practical. Everything was expensive. At the end, NBC pulled the plug after 13 episodes. Number 6. The Fantastic Journey, 1977. DC Fontana knew exactly what kind of show The Fantastic Journey was supposed to be, because she had already helped build one just like it. As a story editor and writer on the original Star Trek, Fontana had written some of the series' most celebrated episodes, including the Enterprise incident and The Ultimate Computer. When she came on board as showrunner for The Fantastic Journey, she applied that same model to a terrestrial setting. But instead of the Enterprise visiting a new planet every week, a group of stranded travelers would pass through different time zones on a mysterious island in the Bermuda Triangle, encountering a new civilization in each episode. It was Star Trek on Earth, and for exactly 10 episodes, it almost worked. The series was produced by Bruce Lansbury Productions and Columbia Pictures Television for NBC. NBC reportedly invested around $200,000 per episode, but the show was rushed into production with almost no development time. Fontana later recalled that they were doing rewrites, settling characters, and figuring out the show's identity on the fly while simultaneously filming. None of it mattered. NBC ordered 12 episodes to follow the revised pilot, but production ended early when ratings proved low. Number 5. Kolchak, The Night Stalker, 1974. On the second night of filming the original Night Stalker TV movie in 1972, Darren McGavin walked up to a network executive on set and told him that this would make a terrific weekly series. The executive told McGavin he was out of his mind. That TV movie went on to become the highest-rated original television film in American history at that time, pulling a 33.2 Nielsen rating with a 54 share. The entire production had cost just $450,000. Initially, Kolchak started as a TV movie and was performing excellently. Then, ABC rushed a sequel into production. In fact, the second movie, The Night Strangler, aired in January 1973 and also performed well. Rather than make a third TV movie, the network pushed for a television series, and in fall 1974, Kolchak, The Night Stalker, hit the airwaves. But the transition from two tightly crafted TV movies to a weekly Monster of the Week series created problems almost immediately. Kolchak ran for just 20 episodes before being canceled in March. Number 4. Planet of the Apes, 1974. CBS paid $1 million for the rights to broadcast the original Planet of the Apes film on television in 1973. It was, at the time, a record-breaking amount for a single movie license. The broadcast pulled enormous ratings, so CBS made a decision that, in hindsight, cost them one of the most promising science fiction franchises ever attempted on the small screen. They canceled Gene Roddenberry's Genesis 2, which had performed well, and ordered a Planet of the Apes TV series instead. The series they got in exchange lasted 14 episodes. Then it was gone. Before production, Fox and CBS originally hired Twilight Zone creator Rod Serling to write a series Bible for the show. Although the final product that premiered on September 13, 1974, was vastly different. In many ways, it retained Serling's basic framework. Each episode had a budget of $250,000, and every ape character required multiple makeup artists spending upward of 3 hours per person in prosthetics before a single scene could be shot. Those delays compounded across every production day. Meanwhile, Serling's original storyline was quietly dropped by the writers. Serling distanced himself from the project once he saw the direction it was heading, and then there was the scheduling. CBS placed the show on Friday nights at 8 p.m., directly against Sanford & Son and Chico and the Man on NBC, the number 1 and number 2 shows in the country at the time. No new series could survive that collision, and Planet of the Apes was no exception. CBS pulled the show after airing just 14 episodes. Number 3. Space, 1999-1975. Space, 1999 was created by Jerry and Sylvia Anderson, and it ran for 2 series from 1975 to 1977. The combined budget across both seasons was £6.8 million. Each episode reportedly cost around £250,000, and the budget showed in every single frame. Behind the scenes, the sets were built like film stages, the miniatures were cinematic grade, and the effects rivaled what Hollywood was doing on the big screen. The premise was haunting. The first season leaned heavily into philosophical and existential storytelling, slow, cerebral, and deliberately unsettling. It was closer in spirit to 2001, A Space Odyssey, than to Star Trek, but the show never landed on a major U.S. network. Lou Grade had been in negotiations with NBC, who were enthusiastic about acquiring the series. At the last moment, Grade raised the asking price. NBC called his bluff and walked away. When CBS and ABC learned that NBC had passed, they declined as well. Grade was forced to sell Space 1999 into U.S. syndication instead, which severely limited its reach and promotional support. Number 2. UFO, 1970. Everything that came after it owes it a debt. Space, 1999, owes it a direct debt, because Space 1999 was literally built from UFO's abandoned second-season designs. The sets were already built, the ships had been designed, the concepts had been developed. The total budget for the series was £2.6 million across 26 episodes. To reduce costs, several props, including the distinctive gull-winged cars, were carried over from the Andersons' 1969 feature film, Doppelganger. The series was set just 10 years into the future and followed a covert international military organization called Shadow, tasked with defending Earth against an ongoing alien invasion. The aliens were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They came from a dying planet and they were harvesting human organs to survive. That premise alone was darker than virtually anything on television at the time. But Anderson pushed further. UFO dealt openly with adultery, divorce, drug use, and the psychological toll of secret warfare on the people fighting it. The show was explicitly not aimed at children, despite many TV station executives assuming otherwise because of Anderson's puppet show pedigree. But as the American syndication run continued, ratings dropped toward the tail end. ITC canceled the second season. Number 1. Logan's Run, 1977. The 1976 Logan's Run film won the Academy Award for Best Special Effects and grossed over $50 million worldwide. It was the last major science fiction blockbuster before Star Wars changed everything. CBS looked at those numbers and immediately commissioned a television series. What they got was one of the most frustrating missed opportunities in the entire history of the genre. The series premiered on September 16, 1977, produced by Ivan Goff and Ben Roberts through MGM Television. Gregory Harrison stepped into the lead as Logan 5. Heather Menzies took over as Jessica 6 from Jenny Agutter, and Donald Moffat joined the cast as REM. Behind the scenes, the pilot episode was co-written by William F. Nolan. But during production, CBS demanded reshoots with significant plot changes, including the introduction of a secret cabal of city elders before they would broadcast it. The interference started immediately. The series initially had solid ratings, but CBS constantly preempted the show, which caused it to lose much of its audience. At the end, only 11 of the 14 produced episodes were broadcast on the West Coast during the original run. If you made it this far, drop your pick for the one show on this list that deserves a reboot in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because we are just getting started.